Sure. I'm Jon Ossoff, and I'm the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate here in Georgia.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll just jump right into it. So, according to your recent article on Medium, which was about your new Strengthen HBCU plan, you mentioned that you held a series of meetings with local HBCU leaders. I noticed that you mentioned Clark Atlanta and Spelman, and you also mentioned the Atlanta University Center Consortium. I'm just curious because I didn't notice where you specifically mentioned Morehouse College. Was there a reason for that, or were Morehouse officials in attendance at these meetings, or what was the case?
Yeah, I certainly spoke with Morehouse alumni. I don't recall if we managed to sit down with any of the current Morehouse executive leadership, but tried to consider the needs and views of a broad spectrum of Georgia's HBCU, not just administrators and faculty leaders, but also alumni and student leaders as well.
Okay, got you. Just wondering, no big deal. So a few of the points in your HBCU plan are emergency pandemic support from the federal government, as well as tuition affordability and the establishment of better facilities and technology on HBCU campuses. My question for you is, this article was released on September 3rd. What was your stance prior to the release of this article on HBCUs?
Yeah, I've been a consistent and long-term supporter of HBCUs. In fact, back in the day when I worked for Congressman Hank Johnson, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, worked in his office to strengthen support for HBCUs, informed by a deep recognition of how important these institutions are. And it's been a real pleasure this year to work with HBCU leaders and alumni to really develop some depth for some legislative plans that we can implement next year to strengthen HBCUs and to make sure that no one who wants to attend an HBCU has to worry that the student debt they may have to take on to afford tuition will be a long-term burden. You know, my conviction is that no Georgian, no American should have to take on a penny of debt to get a degree from an HBCU or from a public college. And I think that will have a transformative impact for so many young people.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And so as of right now, what is it exactly do you think that is preventing HBCUs from receiving these additional federal funding that they are in need of? Is it that other institutions have access to these funds that HBCUs don't, or what is it, do you think?
Well, I think we just need to elect more political leaders who are deeply committed to supporting HBCUs and to strengthening them. You know, it's a question of political will, it's a question of priorities. HBCUs need more champions in Congress, and I will be such a champion. And we need folks in Congress. There are already some people in Congress doing great work on behalf of HBCUs, but we need more champions for HBCUs so that we can pass measures, based upon proposals such as that I've outlined, which will really help strengthen these institutions in the long term and help young people afford the tuition. The tuition affordability piece is something that is so important for us to address because the crippling student debt that young people have to take on to get a college degree, that's just not how it should be. Higher education should expand our opportunities and expand our horizons and not saddle us with financial burdens, right? This is about opening up opportunity, not closing it down. And that's why I think that for a young person to be able to apply to a public college or an HBCU, knowing that they're not going to have to take on a penny of debt to attend that school and get that degree, will have such a positive impact. And in Georgia this year, we have an opportunity to elect two champions for HBCUs. We're the only state in the country with two Senate races this year. And both Reverend Warnock and I are committed to supporting and strengthening these institutions. So I look forward to working with him to pass legislative initiatives that will really help HBCUs here in Georgia.
Okay. It's funny that you mentioned Reverend Warnock. He was actually in the same class at Morehouse with my dad.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yep, they were in the same class together. My dad said that they didn't know each other at the time, but regardless. So oftentimes we see schools are awarded money, but oftentimes the money only goes towards facilities and technology, and you've already kind of touched on what I'm about to ask. But my question for you is, how can you ensure that each individual institution will allocate a certain amount of their federal funding to student scholarships and financial aid?
Yeah, there's two aspects here, Zoe. The first is that we need a dramatic expansion of the Pell Grant program in order to make sure that there is no debt for students who are attending HBCUs or public colleges, and those resources should go directly to college affordability. We also do need significant investment in facilities and maintenance and construction, deferred maintenance, deferred upgrades, long-term strategic plans that HBCUs have to build new facilities, to build new research centers, to build new clinics on campus that they haven't been able to undertake for lack of capital. And then I think the other piece that's really important is these centers for excellence. And what I mean by that is that there are vital professions, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, education, public health, where we as a country have a shortage of professionals and where there's a lack of Black representation in those fields. And so by investing in programs that will help HBCUs grow their capacity to train educators, engineers, scientists, healthcare professionals, we can ensure that those resources are flowing directly toward education, and we can help expand the opportunity for Black Americans to get those professional credentials and to represent their community in those vital professions.
Okay. So, as I'm sure you know, HBCUs have long gone overlooked and undervalued. If elected, how would you get your colleagues in the Senate on board who may view HBCUs as insignificant with your new plan?
Well, that takes relationship building and hard work and advocacy. And that's again, Zoe, where it just takes champions. I mean, we can get this done, and I'll work across the aisle to get it done and build support to get it done. The issue is not that it can't be done. The issue is that folks aren't trying hard enough because it's not a high enough priority. And that is why electing a champion for HBCUs, I think, is so important for these institutions' long-term strength and survival and growth. And long-term investment, strengthening endowments, those investments in facilities. I mean, these are things that take time, and that's why we have to start now. Because while we have to provide short-term, immediate pandemic relief, and while we can get the college affordability and tuition support and debt-free tuition part moving swiftly, the investments in centers for excellence for vital fields like education and public health and engineering, the investments in facilities, those are long-term projects. So time is of the essence, and I'm looking forward to hitting the ground running to get this done.
Okay, you talk about these long-term investments. Do you think that the points that you have outlined in your new HBCU plan will address these ongoing issues of systemic racism that we're facing right now? So, in other words, will these improvements put Black students and Black people in better positions to be accepted into white America as it relates to getting into grad school or starting their careers, getting jobs, things of that nature?
Well, support for HBCUs itself is not a comprehensive solution to the way that racism is systemically embedded in institutions and law, but it's an important part of the solution. And it has to be pursued along with other vital reforms. So as we invest in HBCUs to increase access to education and opportunity for Black Americans, we also have to be passing a new Civil Rights Act to ensure equal protection under the law. We have to be passing a new Voting Rights Act to ensure that Black Americans aren't systematically targeted, as we know they are, with disenfranchisement and voter suppression. We need to be making sure that we're expanding opportunity for Black entrepreneurs and families to access capital. We need to be building equity in other parts of our educational system, breaking the link between the wealth of a community and the resources available for its public schools, breaking the link between health and wealth by expanding Medicaid and building new health clinics. By the way, I think that many of these new health clinics should be located at or near public schools so that families can access preventative care, primary care, urgent care conveniently. So supporting HBCUs is a vital component of a broader plan to redress these grievances and to achieve true equity, true equality under the law in our society.
Got you. So recently, your opponent, Senator Perdue, along with other senators, signed off on a letter to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Majority Whip John Thune on June 16th. And in this letter, they outlined their plan for HBCUs. And they're advocating, similar to you, additional funding, better technological infrastructure at HBCUs. And they also mentioned how they helped to pass the HBCU Partners Act, as well as the Future Act, both of which seem to be crafted with the intention to benefit HBCUs. So my question is, how or why do you think your plan for HBCUs is any better than what Senator Perdue has or is proposing and what he has already done in the Senate?
Well, many of these institutions in Georgia right now are in serious need of help. Payne College right now is talking about having to lay off staff. Morris Brown still hasn't achieved reaccreditation. I spoke with administrators, faculty, and alumni leaders, as I mentioned, from many institutions who described an urgent need for additional support right now. So I'm glad that there is some will in Congress already to support HBCUs, but what's really needed is a significant commitment. And that debt-free tuition piece, substantive investments in expanding engineering and public health and math programs, real investment in facilities. These are long overdue, and these institutions deserve the kind of investment that's commensurate with how important they are to our society, how vital they are to the Black community. But it's not just the vital role that they play in serving Black Americans and providing opportunity to Black Americans. These are gems in our nation's system of higher education. These are institutions that produce professionals, academics, theologians, doctors, entrepreneurs, people who work in all fields and provide immense value to our entire country and to humanity. And so it's really time to get serious about expanding their capacity to do this important work.
Okay. So I have a couple other questions related to your opponent. So Senator Perdue, he is self-described, according to his campaign website, as a, quote, supporter of the president and one who has continued to be one of the president's, quote, closest allies. My question is, do you think that Senator Perdue's claims of advocacy for HBCUs are sincere, considering the president whom he supports is known for racially insensitive rhetoric?
Well, I think that David Perdue puts himself, his donors, his political party, and the president ahead of the people he serves at every turn. He echoed Donald Trump's downplaying and lying and misleading about this pandemic, which, by the way, has disproportionately affected Black Americans in Georgia and across the country. And he's enabled a president who uses fear and division and racism as political tactics. I think that what's happened in this country in the last 4 years it should be of deep concern to every community and every American. We're on the wrong track. We cannot proceed any further down this path of racism and fear and corruption and authoritarianism. We need leaders who appeal to our better angels, who bring us together and who seek justice and equity for all communities in this country. That's not what David Perdue and Donald Trump are about.
Okay. So as you know, we recently lost an icon, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And there's already been a lot of talk about if her spot should be filled before or after the election. So my question for you is, when and how do you think that this vacancy on the Supreme Court should be addressed?
Well, I'd like to see the Senate wait, and I'm deeply concerned that they're going to rush through the confirmation of a justice who will pursue a partisan agenda on the court rather than an impartial agenda to uphold the rule of law. I'm deeply concerned that they're going to rush through the confirmation of a justice who will work to repeal the Affordable Care Act and its protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions who need health insurance. I'm deeply concerned that they'll rush through a justice who will overturn Roe v. Wade and destroy the privacy of women's health care. I'm deeply concerned that they'll rush through a justice who will be an opponent of federal voting rights legislation. So I'd like to see them wait. And I think Senator Perdue's hypocrisy on this is notable. 4 years ago, he was adamant repeatedly that as a matter of principle, judicial confirmation shouldn't proceed in an election year. Now he's totally reversed his position because it's expedient. He should at least be consistent instead of just saying whatever he needs to say at the moment. And, the bottom line is that human health is on the line, human rights are on the line. And I really do think there's a risk they're going to rush someone through who's, not going to make decisions on the bench in the interests of ordinary people.
So that was actually my follow-up question, because I have here mentioned that he has remained relatively silent about this issue, but he was very vocal back in 2016. So my question for you is, what do you think that says about his integrity and honor?
Well, I think David Perdue's word is basically meaningless. He gave these impassioned floor speeches declaring that it was a deeply heartfelt principle that no judicial confirmation should proceed in a presidential election year, and he's just casually swept aside his own words to pursue a partisan agenda. That's what's wrong with politics today, and it doesn't speak well to his integrity. But this is also a man who was, aggressively trading stocks and producers of medical equipment and vaccines and dumping his casino shares after the Senate was briefed on COVID-19, while he told the rest of us we had little to worry about. I don't think that David Perdue has demonstrated that he has much integrity.
Okay, and so I have one final question. According to your campaign website, you served as one of Congressman Hank Johnson, like you remember, one of his, like you said, I should say, one of his national security aides. You were also a member or a mentee of the late, great Congressman John Lewis. And so it seems that you have some good experience working alongside Black leaders. But what would you say to Black voters who may still be on the fence about giving you their vote in November?
Well, so much is at stake in this election. Our access to health insurance and healthcare, our access to higher education, whether we're going to make the kinds of investments in infrastructure and clean energy that are vital, whether we're going to pass a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act, or continue to indulge the politics of Donald Trump, of racism and fear and division. And my platform, which is about expanding access to health, which is about making sure that every family can afford to send their kids to college, which is about strengthening civil rights and voting rights, I think appeals and speaks to the needs of Georgia's Black community and every community. I really think that the problems we need to solve are not mysterious. I think the solutions to these problems are not mysterious. I think that most Georgians, no matter our background, really share mostly the same values and the same interests. What I hope is that Georgia's Black community recognizes that my platform and what I've committed to do in office will improve their daily lives and address problems that our current political leaders are either failing to solve or making worse.
Okay, Mr. Ossoff, thank you.